Hi, everyone, and welcome to Creative Cake Design. I'm Rachel Tufel, and today we are making some really adorable Spritz cookies. And if you haven't downloaded the recipe, I encourage you to do so. It's a wonderful recipe. It will really help you through doing some fun things with these cookies. So to get started, I just want to talk to you about the cookies really quick because they are adorable. We have all different shapes and sizes. We've got some colored cookies as well. And these all play together very, very well. And it's really easy to change up what decor item you're going to do with a Spritz cookie. So let's talk first just with, in regards to the recipe itself. The recipe is a very traditional Spritz cookie recipe with one little alteration, and that alteration is really its consistency. Now, traditionally, a Spritz cookie is actually made in this lovely contraption. This is a cookie press, and it's an electric version, as you can see, which makes your life really easy when it comes to making any type of Spritz cookie. But a lot of the electric versions are just not available anymore, and there are some manual pump style cookie presses available as well. But I just find that it's one more piece of equipment that you have to store and clean and do all the things with. And so I thought I would share my little trick on creating a Spritz cookie that is actually a bit more customizable. I mean, it sort of depends a little bit on what type of tips you're going to utilize, but you can do these with just a simple pastry bag and a couple of more specialized tips. Now, you can absolutely do these with a standard round tip as well. You can do these, so the snowmen are going to be made with a round tip. We have the little Christmas trees that are done with a star tip. So don't feel like you have to run out and buy some special tips. These are Russian tips. They're highly detailed. I'll show you this is a snowflake tip that has just a lot of detail to it. And what's great about these tips is it then provides you with a highly detailed cookie as well. So look at these itty bitty little mini cookies. I love how tiny they are. They remind me of like graham cracker, little like teddy bear graham crackers. Oh, sorry guys, my pupper is with me today. We had some issues last week and he is by my side 100% all the time right now. So my apologies for that. But with the cookie, you can get a lot more detail with a Russian tip as compared to just using a standard tip. Now, this cookie press, they come with little discs that have different types of patterns in them as well. But like I said, I feel like it's a little bit more limiting because there's only so many of those. And with Russian tips and our standard tips, we can go crazy making different designs utilizing our pastry bag. So I really want you guys to know that this is a versatile recipe that can be used either in the cookie press or just in a pastry bag. And that's kind of the fun part of this particular cookie is there are lots of options. There are lots of ways to not only create a decorative cookie, but then also to decorate those cookies. So this is just a really fun cookie all around. They're quick and easy, which is obviously a bonus to making holiday cookies because I feel at least I'm always on this time crunch around the holidays, trying to get all sorts of things done. And my ambition is really, really big to bake, lots of cookies and hand make some gifts and things. And then before you know it, the time has come and I don't have nearly as much done as I had hoped. So This is a quick, easy cookie, great to get your hands in with the kiddos as well, and just really makes this a fun project. It's just great. So download your recipe. I'm going to make it for you, but only because I want to show you the variation in consistency. This, like I said, it's a straightforward recipe, but when it comes to the consistency part, that's when we've got a little bit of questionable additions, I guess is the right word. So I've got butter and shortening going in my mixer, and I just want to mix it on high until it's fully incorporated. This is going to allow us to get that nice, light, fluffy butter mixture that's going to help our cookies really come together, but stay delicious. And of course, slightly golden, especially on the bottom. So that's what's in my mixing bowl. Again, it's just, it's a 1/4 cup of shortening and a stick of butter, which is a 1/2 cup of butter. And what I'm doing is just getting that going. And then I'm going to slowly pour in my sugar as well. It looks like we have a question, which is awesome. So please make sure you note any, go ahead and ask me any questions you want about holiday cookies in general. But this recipe, of course, this is actually one of those recipes that works great both at sea level and high altitude. So GK is asking, what are the high altitude adjustments? And I am serious when I say 0. There are no adjustments for this recipe. This is the same recipe that I have used many years growing up back in Ohio and being on the East Coast for a while. This recipe works great at sea level. And of course, I'm here in Denver at 5280. So we are definitely at altitude. And normally we do need to make adjustments, but for this particular one, no adjustments needed. So once you get your sugar in there, it's going to actually start like perforating the butter, making some air, little tiny bubbles. That's what helps lift these cookies. Now we do have a tiny bit of baking powder in here, and even though that's for leavening, the real leavening is coming from just incorporating a little bit of air into our cookies and making that lovely creamy texture of butter and sugar that we all know is the key to great cookies, and even oftentimes the key to a great cake as well. So you just want to make sure that that mixture is fully incorporated and looks light. So we want almost a white consistency. So let's go ahead and take a peek at the overhead, just so you can see that amazing look that we have. So it is white. It is not as yellow as the butter is. It's certainly not as bright white, excuse me, as bright white as the shortening itself, but it definitely has that consistency that we're looking for. Very light and airy, and just a lovely consistency. So I'm going to go ahead and get that back in there. Let's rearrange our camera so you can actually see something fun and not just the top of that bowl. But I'm going to get that going, and I'm actually going to add in a little bit of vanilla first and an egg. And then you will start to see this mixture really coming together more like a cookie dough. All right, so just going, that's my little 1/4 teaspoon I've got there. That's really more for our baking soda and our salt. So I'm gonna be a little bit more generous. I don't see my little teaspoon isn't sitting out, so we'll go with that. Now I see a question from Howard. Besides extracts, do you have any tips on using dry spices like cinnamon, speculoos, etc.? Yes, absolutely. So aside from utilizing just, well, I have to say I love my vanilla flavor. I absolutely love my almond flavoring. And I wouldn't remove those entirely from your recipe, even if you want to sub out some dry spices for flavoring. You actually want that vanilla in there because it's going to enhance your cinnamon or your nutmeg. Those are really great additions to any type of cookie, really. There is other types of things that we can put in here. We can put in zest like lemon or orange or even a lime zest. You guys, lime zest in this recipe is amazing. It's one of my favorites. It makes it a bit more of a refreshing cookie rather than just, a plain vanilla cookie. And like, don't get me wrong, there's nothing bad about a plain vanilla cookie. I absolutely love my vanilla cookies, but when you're looking for something a little lighter and refreshing around the holidays, that's hard to find if we're not using some of our citrus. So definitely do that. Helen is asking, am I using the paddle? Yes, I'm just using my paddle. No need to use a whisk here. And you can absolutely do this just with a hand mixer with your beaters as well. So don't stress if you don't have a stand mixer. You can do this one in your other, just in a regular bowl with your other hand mixer as well. Now this is salt and baking powder with flour. And yes, should we sift it? Sure, it's gonna make a slightly smoother consistency, but honestly, I have a tendency to break the rules. So that's what's going in, and it's just going to go in a little at a time. It's obviously what's going to give us a beautiful consistency within our cookies, going to bake up nicely. That little bit of salt is there for some balance. We don't have salted butter in here. Now that is one option you could substitute out if you really wanted to, although I prefer to control my salt levels. So that's why I have that separate, but worst came to worst, if that's all you had, you could certainly use that. Okay, so I want to show you for a moment what this consistency looks like. So it's pretty dry. It is not coming together yet. It just breaks apart. So you need to mix it just a little bit more. All right. And that's gonna just allow that mixture to combine. Now, over mixing can become a problem, so don't turn this up way on high. It will make a really tough cookie, and we certainly don't want a tough cookie. But at the same time, we need to make sure it's incorporated. Okay, so now it's coming together. And this is just a lovely, lovely dough. Just want to make sure you guys can see this dough. It is soft. It is not sticking to my fingers at all. You can see it just, it actually will roll into a ball. So you can actually shape this dough if you chose to. There's a lot of different uses for this particular dough. Now, if you are fortunate enough to have a cookie press and that's what you would like to use, this is a great consistency. It's very firm, and it doesn't even need to be refrigerated at this point, which normally we like to refrigerate our cookie doughs. But the problem with this and a piping bag, which is what we're going to use today, is it's way too thick. That will not come through a piping bag very easily. Well, actually it will. It'll just bust your bag. It actually is very easy to just stretch that bag so much that it bursts right out. The tip, the batter, everything stretches in that particular situation. So what we want to do is actually go a tablespoon at a time. And this is going to vary a little bit. Again, your not so much altitude, but dryness that comes into play is a bit of an issue. Dryness of your flour could just absorb the tiny amount of liquid that we have in this particular recipe. So you want to add milk slowly. This is the variation to the traditional recipe that we have. And what you're looking for is a much softer consistency, more like maybe a medium consistency buttercream, for instance. That's maybe the best description I can give you. You don't want anything that is too thick or it's going to go straight through your bag. So this is getting much better. So you guys can see, like, it's just You can pinch it and it squashes together so much easier. So for our snowmen, for instance, or even our wreath with, this is a different type of tip. This is a more like a nozzle tip. Our wreath will actually be able to we can use a stiffer consistency of our dough here. This one is unique because it leaves a hole in the center of your cookie. So just so you can kind of see what those two look like. For piping in a bag with something much smaller, like our snowflake design, we really still need this to be a little bit softer. I just really, I don't want you to hurt your hands is what it comes down to. And we don't want the tip to break out of our bag as well. So please do, be mindful of your hands and making sure that your consistency is not too thick. If you put it in your bag and it's super thick, and I have a couple that I'll show you that are just way too thick, definitely soften it, pull it back out of the bag, soften it, and then refill your bag, because otherwise you're not only going to have a sore hand, but you're going to end up breaking through your bag, and that's no fun. One other thing that I want to mention here is obviously our butter has some color, and it's yellow. And the opposite of yellow is the purple on our color wheel. And so when we add just a little bit of purple into it, it actually will lighten our dough just a bit. So that's one way to do that. You can also just use some of the white. So I kind of do a little bit of both, because I like a slightly whiter cookie when it comes to things that I'm decorating with. It's definitely helpful to make sure that we've got other colors coming through a bit more truer. So let's see. Millie is asking, is butter flavored Crisco okay? I really don't like using shortening, but I assume you're using it for consistency. So you can absolutely use the butter flavored shortening if you would like. There's really no difference between regular shortening and butter shortening, with the exception of that extra flavor that they're adding there. And honestly, what I will tell you is I have skipped the shortening and replaced it with butter, and the recipe is just way too soft and it falls apart. It is not a good consistency without that shortening. So I just want to say, Millie, thank you for bringing that up, because I know a lot of people like to sub out butter in their recipes, but the shortening here is really helpful for consistency. And in addition, it's helpful for texture. Once the cookie is baked, it just has a much, softer bite to it with the shortening in there. Most combinations of butter and shortening are there to help with tenderness. So, subbing it out in some recipes is totally fine, but in others, maybe not so much. So I'm going to grab a little bit of this just so I can show you again what this looks like. Now, it's not sticking to my fingers still, which is great. We don't want it to be so ooey gooey that it just sticks to us. But you can see there's like very little resistance in this particular dough, which is what we are looking for when we are making a Spritz cookie utilizing a bag, rather than our cookie press, which is of course mechanical and has a bit of an advantage over our hands. Yeah, and Howard is saying, wow, that went from crumbly to very firm quickly. It does. It's just a matter of getting the moisture built into the flour. So we want to make sure that the moisture comes together with the flour and It makes a lovely consistency. So if you're underbeating something and it has flour in it, you likely either one of two things: have too much flour in your recipe, or you just haven't mixed it quite long enough. So that's why it's so important to follow recipes and use the exact amounts and make sure that you're mixing for long enough or not too long. That's the other thing. So let's talk about a few different styles of bags, because there is a difference, and I have found this out just through trial and error, and so I want you guys to not have to go through that trial and error process. There are bags that are textured. They have these little dots in them, and while these are really great, you can grip with them a little bit easier, and they say they're stronger, but I have not found that to be the case. They're pretty thin, they're pretty flimsy. I mean, just with my fingers, I can break them apart. So these on their own are not as stable of a bag as what I would prefer. You can double them up. So you can use two of these bags. They are, a less expensive bag. So technically when you're putting two together, that increases the price, but they can be used. You just need to double them up. And the way to do that is to drop in one of your tips, any tip that you'd like, and drop in your second tip as well. And then you want to cut the bag from there. And the reason that I am doubling this up is because just the pressure alone of the batter trying to get through this tip is going to start stretching. And I'm exaggerating, but it's going to stretch that bag and it's just going to pop through. I've got an example here for you of what I mean. So this is the end of the bag right here. And it was all the way up at the top of my tip. But this is a thick batter. I'm using this as a demo for you guys so you can see what not to do really. But this is just such a thick batter. I didn't thin it enough when I put it in here. Again, intentionally, so you guys can avoid that mistake, right? But this is an example of what happens. That bag just really starts to stretch with all that pressure. It can't maintain its shape. But that particular bag doubled up does the job and does it well. And it can, if you have the right consistency of your dough, you can absolutely make it work. But if you're having trouble, just double up your bag and you should be good to go. So even the thin bags are useful if you are struggling with your bags breaking through. Now, the type of bag that I use that I prefer, there's also silicone bags. This is a Wilton silicone bag. And I'll be honest, I actually really love these bags, but the problem with this is it's still pretty stretchy too. It is a reusable bag, but it's still pretty stretchy. So the other option you have is if you have this silicone bag, by all means, drop a regular bag into it. It's going to provide you with a little bit more support for this particular tip. But truly, as long as you thin your batter out enough, you should be fine to simply use one bag. But I just want to give you that sidebar tip because I know I've struggled as well. So let's see, I've got a couple questions, so I don't want to get too far ahead without answering them. Claire is asking what I used for the deep dark green. And this is Satin Ice's new gel color. It is just their standard green. That's all I used in here. And I would say it's definitely more than just a drop or two, but it's not like the whole bottle or anything. So, there's quite a bit in here. It goes a long way. And Debbie's asking if there's any advantage to chilling the dough like overnight before you use it. Not if you're going to use a bag. And I'm going to get to you. I think it's a lie. You're asking why not use a cookie press. We talked about that in the beginning. And I'll just briefly say, if you don't have one, this is an alternative. And there are limited cookie designs that you can use. Whereas if you're using a Russian tip, you've got a little bit more variability, and you can just use plain old round tips or even star tips. So I just wanted to address that quickly. That's there. Dough overnight, what that does is it allows the flour to expand. It lets the gluten settle. And so you'll have a softer cookie, which is lovely. So if you would like to chill this overnight, you can absolutely do that. And if you are using a pastry bag with a tip, I highly recommend you let this sit out for about an hour before you fill your bag, because you will struggle to push cold batter through the tips if you use something firmer. I was just looking for my other snowflake, but I guess it's probably in a bag already. All right, so next, obviously, you just want to drop whatever tip is in that you'd like to use into your bag. And again, we do need to trim, but I caution you, don't trim too far. And I actually like to leave a little excess, because that first squeeze that I'm going to do is going to help me determine if my batter is good or not, if it's too thick or too thin. But it's going to move your tip, I promise you. It's going to stretch a little, regardless of how thick or thin your batter is. So I'm actually going to cut off right in front of it, and you can see there's still a little bit left, but that's again, one more little trick. All right, and now I'm going to scoop in some batter. Don't get too ambitious here. Put in a little bit and go from there. The problem with overfilling your bag is really more about how much pressure then you're gonna have to just use so much. It's gonna hurt your hands, I promise you. So, have a nice size in there. This is maybe a cup is my guess. It's not overly thick. And I'm gonna give it a good squeeze. And I'm not squeezing really hard, I'm exaggerating, but give it a good squeeze and see how that tip and your batter is responding. And it's actually coming out so beautifully. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna trim my bag a little. I got it right, you guys. Sometimes I'm gonna cut this off on the other side so I don't get it into any of my batter. But sometimes I do get it right, and that's fantastic. Again, just make sure that when you're giving it a squeeze, you're getting a really nice, clean look to your batter. That's what you want. And I'm honestly not even squeezing that hard, which is kind of that balance that you have to play with. So with that, let's talk a little bit about pressure. Just before I get started with this, I want to show you the difference in pressure. So what I have here is 3 of the same exact cookie press. It's not this one. This one is actually a different one altogether than what we have, but it is this one here. So I'll just wipe that so you can see. It's got this beautiful, flower in the middle, and then it's got some additional pieces on either side. The difference in the height, some of them are really thin. Some of them are a little thicker, and then even thicker, and probably what I would call maybe way too thick. But these are actually the errors because my batter was too thin. So again, I like being able to show you what not to do. This is too thin, and you can see it's overbaked. So this is actually, let me do that. This is actually just a whole lot more pressure through my tip. So you can create a variation in each of your cookies depending upon how much pressure you are adding. So let me just show you here. This is, I'm going to try to come in a little closer as well and get our mixer out of the way now. Let's see here. All right. So what I'm going to do is this bag is right on the edge. There's a little overlapping, but that's actually a really good guide for me right at the moment. You want to hover over top. Let me see if I can show you this way. So you're going to hover over. So this is flat. And I am going to pull away just a little, squeeze, attach it to the pan, and then stop squeezing and pull away. Only it stuck, which happens usually on your first one or two. And the fact that I'm kind of doing it sideways, that doesn't help either, you guys. Make sure you're flat on the surface. But what you want to do is actually hover just a hint over top, squeeze, stop squeezing and lift. Squeeze, stop squeezing and lift. And again, if it gets caught, just give it a little wipe on the side of the bowl. But this is just barely above the surface. And eventually you get into a good rhythm and they'll come out really fast. Squeeze, squeeze. So, you can vary your pressure just a little bit to get the cookie to stick. These are non-greased. You do not want to grease your pan. They will not stick at all to your pan if you keep greasing it. So you want a pan that is ungreased. Just give it a squeeze, pull away. If you want a thicker cookie, just squeeze a little longer and lift your bag just a little higher and then pull away. So I'm going to show you this way. You can see now, super thin, slightly thicker. So that's the difference just in the pressure that I am using with my bag. So again, that comes down to consistency of your dough and how much pressure you're using through your tip. Now, I will tell you that a tip like this that has very thin lines in it, you really need to go on thinner on your batter. These are working really well. Again, I probably used 3 tablespoons of milk for the whole batch. And you can adjust that. Like, I usually try to get the right consistency of batter first and then separate and color my dough, because at least then I know the consistency is right and I don't have to adjust it multiple times between both. And I want to show you this one only because, again, this batter, first of all, is much thicker. And on top of that, my bag is a little bit cut short, even though it was good in the beginning. This is a much easier hole to work with compared to, see, I'm going to squeeze this and it is just going to come right off. So that's what you want to avoid. So this is, and I'll show you the difference in the batter. Look at, this is firm. So again, you can push it, but it takes a lot of, and it will stand up. Like, it takes a lot of pressure to get through that. Versus, while this one will still make a shape, I'm pressing very, very lightly. Look how soft that is. It just goes right to where it needs to be. So again, making sure that your dough is the right consistency is the key here. So that's the snowflake. If we were going to just do the snowman, I want to show you a few different designs so that you have some options. For instance, if you don't have the snowflake Russian tip, don't stress. This is just a round tip. It is a number, I think a 2B. For a Wilton tip, it would be a 2B, and this is, I think, a 308 for a Teco. So a round tip about the size of a dime is how I would describe that. And for the snowflake, for the snowman, it's one little circle. That first one always never wants to stick for me. And then a slightly bigger circle. And then what I'm going to do is actually just use my finger and pat that roughness down a little bit so that it creates a really soft shape. So that's what you would get if you didn't put any sugar on it, or just leaving it with a smooth surface. And this is the size approximately of what I piped out and how it baked out. But if you want to add something that has more decorative elements, this is sanding sugar. This sanding sugar is fantastic. I'm going to give a shout out to Walmart's brand. They just have a really great sanding sugar. It's absolutely fantastic. It's super fine, and as you can see, super sparkly. It just shimmers. It's the best. It's the best shimmery white sugar I have ever used. So go get yourself some great value sprinkles. It's sanding sugar. It's absolutely fantastic. If you want to create the snowman, well, then you need a few extra things. Now let's talk about some of the extra things that we can use, because they are not all made the same. Sorry for my reach, you guys, but I want to bring these in here real quick. I want to talk first just about the fact that we have regular sprinkles or jimmies. We have these, which are more like a pressed sugar almost. It's definitely a thicker consistency, more like a royal icing, if that makes sense. And then, of course, we have candy coated. These are actually chocolate little nibs, and they're just candy coated. These all work great. And this one is candy coated as well. These are little sunflower seeds. So if you're looking for something that looks like a carrot nose, these are sunflower seeds that are also candy coated, and they work really well. What I will tell you that does not work well, and it's maybe a little difficult to see, but this is a pressed sugar, and it's got dye over it. It's not actually like candy coating. The things to avoid. If it just looks like it's glazed, it's got a little paint over it, it's not candy coated. And these are actually going to melt in the oven. So you can still use these. You just have to place them when you're done, rather than placing them before you bake them. So for instance, I can put my little sunflower seed nose in. I can use my little cocoa nibs that have been candy coated. I think I have picked out all the black buttons. I am definitely in need of some new cocoa nibs. I see some hiding. They're getting away from me. But these little cocoa nibs work great for buttons and eyes. I love them. I think they're super cute. I much prefer to use something that is edible on the inside, rather than just a hard chunk of sugar, for instance. I prefer to have like chocolate inside, or a seed, something of that sort, but no difference. I mean, if you want to use some of these other ones, you certainly can. It would be really cute if you did little snowflakes as the buttons as well. I'm going to put just a snowflake up in the hair, or the hat and the head, just for almost like a little bow. You could certainly adorn with other things. Again, these we would want to wait on, but these are really cute for like a bow tie almost. There's lots of different options. Look around at your store, find something that you think would look cute. But you do need to be careful with what you choose. I'm just looking for, I'll show you this one. Even my my little cocoa nibs started to bleed. These are the blue rather than the black that are on here. And you can see my sunflower actually baked. Honestly, this one was baked too long, I think, but that cracked as well. So some of these adornments you will need to do afterwards. This snowflake, I'm shocked that it actually looks this great, but you wanna know why? It's because it was placed as they came out of the oven. So this is probably the best difference I can show you. You know, these black ones did great. The blue ones, not so much. I think that's just the type of dye that was used. But when you are baking these off, so again, this one maybe slightly overbaked just because it's so golden. That one's definitely a deeper golden. So this one's probably just a touch overbaked. You don't want to overbake these because they will get dry and hard, and obviously they turn golden, which for most cookies, that's what you're looking for. You want that, but just a hint of gold. But again, these little hearts were placed after they came out of the oven, and I'm talking like immediately after they came out of the oven. So don't wait if you're going to add things like that to any of your dough. Wait until they are out of the oven, but still warm, because otherwise they won't stick. Another option would be to use some of Satin Ice's glue. They have a beautiful glue. You can come in and just, even on, you know, a fully baked cookie like this, for instance, with no adornment on it, you could absolutely use a little bit of their edible glue, and you could put a little snowflake or, you know, any type of other adornment if you are looking to just jazz it up a little bit more. You could also pour a glaze over these. These particular ones actually have just a sanding sugar in a different color. These are blue sanding sugars. So that's what was put on here. And when you are choosing, you know, sorry, let me back up for a second. If you want to use any of the sanding sugars, I do encourage you to bake those onto your cookies. Those are actually, hang on, those work really well for getting that little bit of shimmer to them. But they need to be baked on because the sanding sugar is so fine. Let me grab some for you. It is so fine that it just doesn't hold well on a fully baked cookie, because this is super fine, and this batter is a little damp, and so, you know, it will hold really well when you put your sanding sugar on it now, versus a dry cookie just doesn't hold it. So you have to either glaze it or put gum glue or anything on here. One way to make sure you get plenty of sugar on there is fully coat them. Now, I know this looks like, oh my gosh, she is wasting all of her sugar, but just give it a tiny tap, and then you're gonna pour it onto, we'll just give it a shake and get it to one corner. And then you just dump it out into a bowl, put the sugar back into your container, and you're fine. This, obviously only use this particular sugar then for unbaked cookies. You wanna make sure you label your sugar and your sprinkles. If they're going to get baked, no problem. This will actually just hold really nicely. But we don't want any raw dough that may be within this mixture to be put on like a finished cupcake, for instance. So I always kind of use, I will keep this as my fresh sugar, and then I have a second container and I will just mark it as dough sugar. And then that way I'm not cross-contaminating anything back and forth. So yeah, let's see, questions so far? How are you guys doing? Let me show you this lovely tip. I am a big fan. It's another style of basically like a Russian tip. I'm gonna have to wipe this tip off because this is batter that I made yesterday. So all you have to do is, if you are running out of time and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to go run somewhere, or my hand hurts, or whatever reason, you can store it right in the bag with your tip on. Just make sure you put it in a Ziploc bag, and then you can use it later, refrigerate it and use it later. So this one, you actually set it flat onto the surface, squeeze, stop squeezing and pull away. That's one problem with not having enough batter in here. That's what happens as well. You can't get a good squeeze on it with the coupler. So squeeze, stop squeezing, and pull away. Oh, come on. Again, those first ones, for whatever reason, you just kind of got to get in a groove. It works with the cookie press situation as well. There's just not enough batter in here, considering I have a coupler attached. And that is, I should mention, this is another way to really secure your tip with your bag. What you want to do, though, is make sure that your bag is longer than the tip, to make sure that you can actually keep it in there. So the bag is cut to the length of this plastic coupler. You can see the bag right here. And that's just to make sure there's no way that this tip is coming out. So if you are really wanting to secure your tips, the coupler is the way to go. It does also allow you to change between tips, which of course is fantastic. Let me just swap over to, let's do a Christmas tree. You'll see that this, some of these patterns are very, very tiny. And so you might struggle with getting the batter the way that you want it. Now, when you get low, this is one option. Push it, twist it, and push it like a little button almost. But squeeze, stop squeezing, pull away. And you can get a really cool Christmas tree effect too. So again, that's why I love the Russian tips. Well, when they work, right? But again, you just got to get yourself into a groove. Make sure you have enough batter in here, and give a little press on the board, and then it will stick for you. Now, again, if you don't have fancy Russian tips, don't stress. This is a star tip. This is more of a closed star tip. It's very tiny in comparison. Can you see that? There you go. It's just flatter, but you can use your traditional star tips as well. I will show you the difference. This is a cooked, baked cookie. So this particular cookie was made with this flatter tip that you can see. And then this cookie was made with a traditional star tip. So you can see just the ridges are just a little bit different, but very similar regardless. And for that type of tree, it's actually very easy. You just want to start piping, and you're gonna circle one direction and the other. And you're just going to do that a couple of times, both sides, and then your last one's going to go down. And so you're basically going out just a little bit further with each of your swirls. It's easier for me to pipe and not talk. Sorry. But this is a great way to just use your normal tips that you already have at home. And I think that is one of the things that I really like doing is, I don't want to say repurpose, because I'm not really repurposing anything here, but I'm changing from using, you know, something that's going to cost me a lot of money. These, again, the electric ones, they're hard to find, and they can easily be $100 or more. The hand pump one is more like maybe $30, maybe $30 to $40. But we have bags. Most of us probably already have a ton of tips These tips at your local craft store or even Walmart, big box stores, these are usually $1. Like if you want to do a few different styles of cookies, but you only want to use one tip, you can do that. So for instance, instead of using this fancy tip, which again, I did get that at Walmart. So that's an option, but you could just use your star tip and just go in circles all the way around. And now I have a beautiful wreath. So I guess the real thing that I want to say is you don't have to have fancy equipment or fancy tips to be able to put out a really beautiful cookie. You have lots of options. You can really get creative with any type of tip that you might have. They're all lots of fun. I definitely have played with different types of tips. Another way to do a tree, I'm kind of stuck on trees, aren't I? But you kind of have to do it backwards. Let me go this way. Let me find a spot here. Actually, let's just do this because it's going to be a whole lot easier for me. For a tree, you just need to work from the bottom. So do 5 of the little shells, and then you just overlap with 4, and then 3. Yeah, we'll sneak another one in there, and then 2 and 1. So you can, again, and if you wanted to, you could color brown or even just use a little bit of the white, or I'm going to roll it because why not? We can, just a little tree trunk at the bottom could work. And then always, always, always just some fun decorative sprinkles. So I just want to, it goes to show you that you don't have to have fancy equipment. You don't have to have all the tips. Just play with what you have. Use different elements to then decorate with it as well. And one of the other things that I use a lot is just random sprinkles. You could do a reindeer with the eyes, and you could use a pretzel here as well for his antlers. There's lots of different ways to take just a basic cookie dough, and you could spend hours if you wanted to, or you could just use one simple tip and squeeze. Oh, this one's the hard one, sorry. That dough is way too firm. But it could be really fast, or it could be, long, relaxing, decorative, have a lot of fun with it. But you just kind of got to get in a little groove with your dough. So what questions do we have? Any more questions? You guys had a lot of questions with the recipe, so I'm super glad that I showed you that, because I think, oftentimes people just assume that you know how to make a recipe by following the directions, but there's always little itty bitty tidbits of information that I forget about when I'm writing a recipe, and not taking the time to actually think about all the things I'm looking for, right? So just a heads up on that. So once you have all of your cookies set out in your dough, at least, however you want to make these, I do like to chill these for just a moment. You don't have to, because these are they're not spreaders. They're not cookies that are, if your batter's way too soft, they will start to spread. But in order to get that texture coming through, there is a limit to how soft your dough can be. So keep that in mind as well. But you don't need to refrigerate it. However, if you are concerned about maintaining all of that detail, it is recommended that you do that. I can tell you that so this is a baked cookie. I did not refrigerate these in between, and they held their texture quite well. So there's always rules to be broken, in my opinion. You don't have to always follow the rules. I think there's some general baking rules that are super helpful, but just know that you don't have to follow that. What other questions do we have? Any? You guys have been so great with your questions. Thank you so much for joining me. I am so glad that I was able to share this particular recipe with you. It's a favorite that I really love and have a lot of fun with. Let me bring in some of the finished cookies that I have in here. Oh, I'll show you the difference. See, I totally forgot. I'm so glad I grabbed these. This is one of those candy snowflakes that was put on before baking. This was put on after baking. So there is a big difference in the type of sprinkle. Now these sprinkles were baked on right in advance. So, they didn't spread, they didn't bleed, no problems there. So you do have to be a little careful with what type of sprinkle you're using, but these are beautiful just by themselves as well. So don't feel like you have to adorn them. I just like playing around and seeing what works or what doesn't work. But well, thank you again for joining me. I'm so glad you are all here. I hope that you try this recipe. It's delicious. I promise it's absolutely delicious. And have some fun with changing out either the extract flavors or, as one of our viewers mentioned, are there other things we can use? Use a little bit of zest. Just zest it pretty fine. That's the only, use a microplane. But zest inside of these cookies is a lovely way to change up your flavor profile. Using a little bit of cinnamon or nutmeg, some pumpkin spice, for instance, could work. You could put crushed peppermints, not only on top of these, but if you aren't going to be using any fine tips and you're just using the circle, for instance, the round tip for our snowman, you could put crushed up peppermint in there, and these are absolutely delicious. You can also just sprinkle it on top if you'd like, but any type of additional flavorings, especially around the holidays, we've got great flavor choices to choose from, things like a nuttiness, or we could put ground up pecans or walnuts inside of this recipe as well, and you'll have a beautiful cookie. Those types of things that you're adding to your cookie won't change your texture a whole lot. Those are additions that are just great flavor additions, but it's not going to change your batter consistency a whole lot. But remember, you can always add things to the top. You could use little cherries or different types of dried fruits to adorn with as well. So be creative. That's the whole goal with baking and enjoying ourselves around the holidays. It should be fun, it should be creative, and of course, it should be delicious. So again, try these recipes, enjoy at home, and let us know if you have more questions. And of course, happy holidays to everyone.